Most people like to be good at what they do. Many people want to get better at what they do, be it in sport, music, romance, or providing healthcare. Sometimes we're not as good as we think we are. Often we focus most effort on what we're already good at the expense of tackling blind spots. For example, clinicians tend to pursue professional development in areas of interest where their performance is already high, rather than areas of relative weakness or patient need. Audit and feedback aims to improve patient care by reviewing clinical performance against explicit standards and directing action towards areas not meeting those standards. We will now go on a rapid tour, visiting different types of feedback, what we know about feedback from research, and suggestions for improving the impact of feedback. Feedback can take various forms. It can concern processes of care, such as offering evidence-based treatments, or outcomes of care, such as survival or quality of life. It can use routinely coded and collected data, or structured reviews of patient records. It can be verbal or written, use words or graphs. Audit and feedback generally works. A Cochrane review of 140 randomized trials found that audit and feedback improved adherence to recommended processes of care by around 4%. That might sound like a modest effect, but cumulative incremental gains through repeated feedback and the audit cycles can deliver transformative change. Audit and feedback has a reach and population impact through scaled-up national programs, which other quality improvement programs may not achieve with similar resources. However, the Cochrane review also found that effects varied a lot between different trials. 1/4 of interventions had a relatively large positive effect on quality of care, whilst another quarter of feedback interventions had no effect or sometimes even made things worse. Larger effects were generally present when baseline performance was low, feedback was delivered via a supervisor or colleague, when feedback was provided more than once, when feedback was delivered in both verbal and written formats, and when feedback included explicit targets and an action plan. Building on the Cochrane review, expert interviews and evidence synthesis were used to derive state-of-the-art suggestions for effective feedback. These suggestions concern 4 areas: the nature of the desired action, the nature of the data available for feedback, the feedback display, and the delivery of feedback. So let's consider an example from each. First of all, the nature of the desired action. The advice here is to recommend actions that are under the recipient's control. Clinicians can become frustrated and even demotivated if given feedback on actions outside of their immediate control, and which depend upon the likes of patient behaviour or organisational resources not at their disposal. So when choosing audit standards, focus on actions that are under the control of recipients. Next, think about the nature of data available for feedback. Choose comparators that reinforce desired behaviour change. Giving feedback to clinicians who take pride in their work requires careful thought. For example, feedback showing performance against an average may send mixed messages. Those who are above the average may perceive little or no urgency to improve, even if they are just above the average. However, showing comparisons against the top 10% of performers may be too discouraging for those who feel they're at the bottom of the heap. A compromise could involve, say, showing a comparison against the top 25%. You might call this a goldilocks zone, where you're doing just enough to motivate change and reinforce good practice without losing those towards the tail end of performance. So when giving feedback, check how it is perceived by a range of people and be prepared to adjust your comparators. Then think about the feedback display. Minimize extraneous cognitive load for feedback recipients. In other words, make it less complicated. Feedback is often designed and delivered by people who care a lot about a given topic. Sometimes such eagerness translates into excessively detailed feedback or the use of complex graphics which recipients need to work at to understand. We are generally dealing with people who are glancing at feedback during a 5-minute coffee break or at the end of a long day. Curb your enthusiasm. Be kind to the recipient. And then finally, think about the delivery of feedback. And one tip here is to prevent defensive reactions. Feedback comparing performance amongst different healthcare organisations and clinicians can leverage competitive instincts, but this may not always work as intended. Nobody likes being told they're getting it wrong repeatedly. Continued negative feedback perceived as punitive can be demotivating, add to burnout, and elicit defensive reactions. However, most people are suckers for a compliment. So wherever possible, accentuate the positives, such as emphasizing any recent improvement and focus on future benefits, for example, benefits to patients. So there you have it. Audit and feedback generally works. Doing it again and again and doing it well may just improve your patient care.